In this video we're going to install this new alternator. The part number for that is LRA100. There's also another part number here, GXE2211, and I'll just show you the label here. This is from British Motor Imports, or Mini Kingdom in New South Wales, Australia. So the reason why I'm replacing this alternator, the current one I've got in there, the Lucas, I think it's a 15ACR, something like that. It's got an external regulator and that isn't working correctly, and this new alternator actually has an internal regulator. So it was cheaper to buy this whole unit than try and get a replacement external regulator. What else did I pick up? I also picked up another one of these brackets. It might be useful, it might not be. The one I had on there originally, this part here, don't think it was from a Mini, so maybe that will make things fit a lot better. Alright, to get started I need to remove the current alternator, and the process to remove that is that you loosen up these two bolts at the top. There's another one further down that'll allow the alternator to sort of move in a bit. Just on the engine block there's another attachment too. So loosen all them up, the alternator will move down, then you can take the belt off, then you can just take the whole thing off, and there is a wiring connector on there too. Okay, so now I've got that alternator out and on the bench, we'll just have a chat about some differences, and I'll talk about the connections first of all, because that's the main difference. You'll notice on the Lucas AC 15AC, you've got one terminal here which is for the light on the dash, like the ignition light on the dash. You've got a negative terminal and then you have a positive terminal. Now the difference on this alternator, the new one, you still have the terminal for the that goes to the dash for the light, ignition light, but both of these two pins here are positive. They're actually both connected inside, and the way the alternator gets earth is just through the actual main body. So that's how it's earthed, so there's no separate earth wire that goes on this pin. So at the moment my connection does actually have a connector on here which goes to earth, so I've disconnected that, so I only have two wires coming to the terminal pin, so one for positive and one for the ignition light. Alright, so that's the electrical side of things. The next issue is of course size. So the actual, I'll try and get this angle right, so if you look at those two connections there, you'll see that there's a slight difference in height. It's not significantly different, but there is a difference again. The other issue is too, this hole here, it's slightly bigger on the old one. The other thing here, someone's jammed a bit of copper pipe in there. I think I probably did that just because the hole was incorrect. The other major difference as well, the lining up of these two points. So on the old Lucas alternator, they're directly opposite each other, but then on this new one, you'll notice that they're both sort of, instead of being over here, it's sort of over here. So that's why this new bracket which I've got, that would probably be better. That's the one I've had installed on the old one. So I need to do a test fit first, just to make sure that this bracket is fine. The other issue too is that people have mentioned that the pulley needs to be changed over. Ideally, I don't want to have to do that. The manufacturer or the online parts seller that sold it said you have to adjust the spacing because it doesn't quite line up, but I'll put them side by side. It's difficult to get them lined up exactly side by side on the bench, but if I line up those 2 points, the pulleys seem to be pretty much in the right spot. It might be out by like a few millimeters, but so at this stage here I'm not going to take and switch over pulleys because I just want to keep the new one on there, and I'll have to do a test fit just to see how everything fits. Alright, so on the subject of belts now, the current belt which I had on there, I'll just show you the part number, 11A0825. So that should be the correct size belt if you're using an alternator. I know if you're using a generator, I do believe the last few digits are 15, so it's a slightly smaller belt. The other thing too I want to play around with is brands as well, because this belt, the actual rubber it's made out of, I don't know whether it's because I've got the belts too tight or they just weren't aligned correctly with that old alternator, but bits of the rubber come off. I'm going to fit this different brand here. So the existing one is a Caliber brand. That's sold from Super Cheap Auto. It's actually manufactured by Gates. So instead of using that belt, we're going to try a different brand, and that will be the Dayco, because Dayco, I do believe it's a better brand. And you can see the actual composition of the rubber material in here looks a lot higher quality. So again, it's the same size belt, but the Dayco brand might be a bit better. So we're going to do a test fit with this belt and then just see how it all goes together. Okay, so let's get this put back together now. This is probably about the 4th time I'm putting it on, and what I've done, I've played around with a few different washers just to work out the spacing. So it's about 3 millimeters, so that the pulley needs to be shifted in that direction. So the way to do that, I didn't want to pull this apart and put any washers inside there, but rather than just space up the top here. So normally this part of the alternator sits flush with the water pipe, but I'm going to use these washers. So each of them is about 1 millimeter thick. So if I'm going to use 3 there, you also need to use another 3 down the bottom. So on that, the piece that bolts to the actual engine that goes through here, just before this slides on, before that end slides on, you need to put the same amount of washers on that piece as well. So that'll need 3 washers down the bottom. So I'll slide them on, because then that way the spacing is correct. So the whole alternator will shift that direction by about 3 millimeters. So getting it on isn't too difficult, especially if you've got a grill that can remove. So I'll just carefully maneuver it in there, just watching the wires. I'll slide on the bottom piece first, and then get that top bolt in. There we go, and I'll just let it rest for a second. So that spacing now should line up, and what I'll do in a moment is I'll move the camera into that position so you can sort of see how that looks. So I'm just going to do up these other bolts. Obviously not fully tightened, just get them on just so the thing is held in place. Okay, let's have a look how I've got this aligned. So with the camera sort of directly above, you want to position, you do what I'm doing and use a camera on a tripod to position it. Obviously, or you can just do this with your eye if you can keep your head still enough. And then what you want to do is compare the alternator pulley with the crank pulley below, and if you it's probably a bit difficult to see on the camera, but if you try and make sure they are aligned as close as they, or correctly as they should be, you can sort of see that the V's line up, and then the water pump pulley and then that lines up with the crank pulley. So they're all in reasonable alignment. So do that first before you fit the belt on. So the next step now is just to start, or to actually hook the belt on and then tension it, and then just see how it fits. Alright, so I just did a test. That seems to be running fine. We were getting up to like 14 volts, and then you saw on the reading there, so that seems okay. The alignment looked okay. When you're looking at it running, it seems like it's not wobbling or doing anything silly that it shouldn't be. So hopefully all is well now. Alright, so I'm going to leave it there. Hopefully you've sort of seen how to actually adjust that and put some spacing washers in there. And I'll leave it there, and thanks for watching my videos.